Gonzaga's new conference has national title contenders in football, basketball, and baseball. Can the Conference of Champions live up to its name in the new era?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Randy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Gametime. Folks, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Well, it is Mailbag Monday today. As a reminder, if you want to get involved in Mailbag Monday, you want to hear your questions answered on the show, you can do so in multiple different ways. You can email me, andypatton013@gmail.com. You can also join the Locked On Zags Discord community. There is a spot in there to ask your mailbag questions. I always round those up before we do every mailbag show, so that's a great opportunity to do so. You can also follow me on social media platforms, most active on Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, Twitter as well. So you can find me there and ask your questions to get them answered that way. 9 different questions to get to today. First one here comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, what is your overall impression of the new look Pac-12 for Gonzaga? Yeah, it's a solid league. And I think, a lot of the conversation recently has been about how they were coming right up to that deadline to add a new school. And with mediation going on with the Mountain West, there was kind of some negativity surrounding the Pac-12 and why did it take so long to add this new school? Are they even going to find a new school? Are they just desperately grasping at straws? And certainly I think there were things that maybe could have happened at a different time or some opportunities that passed the Pac-12 by, but nobody, bats 1,000 in conference realignment unless you're maybe the SEC. And I think ultimately, while Texas State is maybe not the most desirable final team to be added, at least this go around, this cycle for the conference, I think overall you got to feel pretty good about it. I said it in the cold open, Boise State's going to be a legitimate contender in football. And I say legitimate contender. Boise State's not going to be out there winning national championships left and right. Football is so dominated by the SEC and the Big Ten and bigger programs. But Boise State should absolutely be a regular contender to get that final playoff spot from the non-Power 4 conferences, and has obviously had tons of success on the gridiron for decades at this point. And so I think they're a really good kind of anchor for this conference on the football side of things. Then that's to say nothing of Washington State and Oregon State, who, while they weren't regular contenders in the Pac-12, they were frequently ranked and have had great programs in the past as well. And then, of course, on basketball, you have Gonzaga and San Diego State, who have both been to national championships very recently. You also have some programs that have seen quite a bit of recent success. Utah State being among them. Colorado State has had recent success. Even Boise State's been doing well on the basketball side of things as well. And then in baseball, you have Oregon State, who's a very legitimate national championship contender on the baseball side of things. They were in the College World Series. They had an opportunity. They didn't do as well as they should have, and they lost earlier than I think a lot of people thought they would, but they were still a great program this past year. Fresno State's had some baseball success in the not too distant past as well. Shout out Aaron Judge, by the way, who went to Fresno State as well. So you'd like to add one more basketball school, mostly for ease of scheduling. If you have a 10th basketball playing member, at that point, you play everybody twice. There's 9 other teams in your conference, 9 times 2, 18, boom. It's the really easy way to schedule. And ideally, of course, for Gonzaga and for the Pac-12, you want that final basketball playing member to be somebody who's competitive, whether it's St. Mary's, whether it's Memphis. You don't want it to be like a UTSA or a Rice or North Texas or somebody like that. While some of those additions may make sense for the conference as a whole because of their football and because of their location and things like that, it doesn't really add strength to the basketball side of things. And with Texas State already being an addition that doesn't add much on that side of things, you'd like to see somebody a little bit better there. But boosting football is also huge. If you can get Memphis, even if you get Memphis football only, and you get a scheduling agreement with them, that helps Gonzaga, that helps San Diego State potentially. And then maybe you can also sneak a big-time basketball addition. Maybe it's St. Mary's again. Maybe it's even Wichita State, which I don't love, but it's a reasonable, if they were to pry Memphis away, even as just a football only member, the American Athletic Conference would start to get, those programs would start to get a little jittery, and perhaps that could lead Wichita State to leaving and jumping over to the Pac-12, where they'd get to play Gonzaga and San Diego State and all these other high profile basketball programs. So it's a good start. And Gonzaga is about to make way more money in the new Pac-12 than they were making in the WCC. So even if the conference is not perfect, the amount of money Gonzaga is going to bring in from these media rights deal, even though we don't know the full scope of it, it's millions upon millions of dollars more than they were making in the conference. And in an era where making money to be able to spend on your student athletes is the most important thing in order to stay competitive, this is crucial for Gonzaga. Next question, another one from Jeff here. Jeff says, who do you think will be Gonzaga's biggest rivalry in Pac-12 basketball? Could the Pac-12 just be a bunch of really good rivalries without a main top rival for Gonzaga? I think it's going to be San Diego State. I think, and Jeff kind of laid out reasonings for a couple of these teams. You mentioned San Diego State geographically being very far. And yes, that's true. But they're the best basketball team in the conference outside of Gonzaga by a hefty margin, historically and recently. They've played each other recently. San Diego State is one of few teams that has beat Gonzaga in Spokane multiple times, like one of very few teams that has done that has not been in Gonzaga's conference. So they already have this history. They already have this, Gonzaga just went and beat them at their house last year. I think that this is already set up to be a rivalry that, it's already there, but it's set up to just take off instantly once they're in the conference. Obviously, Washington State and Boise State make a ton of sense regionally, historically, at least in the case of Wazoo. Wazoo is going to spend a whole bunch of their money on football. Their priority by a huge margin will be keeping their football program or getting their football program to national relevance and keeping them there. That is going to mean basketball takes a backseat. This is the same thing in basketball, the same thing for Boise State, in basketball. Boise State has been good. Leon Rice is a good coach, but they're going to spend so much of their resources to keep that football program relevant. And I think that will be at the expense of basketball. One of the few programs in this conference that I think will remain consistently good on a basketball scale is San Diego State because they prioritize basketball. Not that they're going to, push aside football or anything like that, but I think that means that they're likely to be competitive with Gonzaga on a regular basis. And I'm not super confident any of these other teams really will. Although I will say, I think Utah State's a dark horse here. Utah State has been consistently good despite having 4 coaching changes in the last decade. They have remained good. Every coach they bring in seems to succeed there, whether it's Craig Smith, who goes to Utah, Ryan Odom, who moves on, is now at Virginia. They've had many other, Danny Sprinkle is now at Washington. They've had many successful coaches. It's a huge arena, the biggest arena in the Pac-12. I think there's some real opportunity for this to become a pretty significant rivalry for Gonzaga as well. Final question of the first segment here comes from Will12233 on Discord, who says, with the addition of Mario St. Superi and Braden Smith being a junior, if we assume both will be back next year, does that deter players like a Kenna Elozi or other 2026 guards from committing here? Potentially, yeah. It's absolutely a factor that these players consider and a factor that these players should consider. If your goal is to be a one and done, and I don't know if that's true of Elozi, but if that is your goal as a incoming freshman or as a high school recruit, you don't want to go somewhere where you may not get the playing time that you want. It's entirely reasonable decision-making. It's part of the reason that Zoom Diallo reportedly did not come to Gonzaga. He also got offered a significant amount of money, it sounds like, from UW, but he wanted to go somewhere where he would play right away, and he didn't feel he was going to get that at Gonzaga. The counter here, not really counter, but my thoughts on it is I wouldn't want a guy who is scared of little competition. I wouldn't want a guy who says, well, I don't want to go there because I may not start. I doubt Mark Few saying, hey, you're guaranteed not to start. There's no chance that that's the messaging. The messaging is, hey, we got these guys. We're expecting them back. You'd come in and compete with them for playing time. And if a player says, I don't want to do that, I don't want that smoke. Okay, thank you for your time. In my mind, that cannot be the attitude that you have. I would also point out that while we're expecting St. Superi and Braden Smith to be back for a second year, we don't know that that's true. Either of them could transfer. Either of them could opt to go pro. Again, you don't know that. But also we do know that Adam Miller will be gone, that Tyon Grant Foster will be gone, that Jalen Warley will be gone, barring, of course, injuries or anything like that. And Mark Few loves playing 2 guards. So the starting lineup, not this upcoming season, but the next season, could very well have both St. Superi and Braden Smith in it. Or somebody like Elozi could come in and step into a starting role right away because Gonzaga is willing to play those 2 point guards together. So I don't think that it's something that should deter players, but I think if it's something they're worried about, I think Mark Few and the staff are going to look for other players who they think are more comfortable coming into a program where they're going to compete for playing time. Well, who would I add to Gonzaga's schedule if it were up to me? I'm going to explain my choices and why, and answer some other mailbag questions, all coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, if you're like me, I'm sure you've decided to head out to a ball game at the last minute with some friends or some family. Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize, I just really want to be in the stands today. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without all the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drink, merch, or even invite a bigger group of friends to come out to the park with you. Gametime makes it easy, and prices on the app, they actually drop the closer that you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that just takes the worrying out of buying. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. Or, in this case, let's talk about Summer League. Fans in Salt Lake, if you're in that Utah area, you can take in an action between Memphis and Philadelphia on Tuesday. That includes Jeremy Jones, Efton Reed, Hunter Salas, trio of former Zags. There's some former Wazoo guys. Cedric Howard is playing for Memphis next year as well. You can get these tickets for $40. You can get some tickets that are right down on the sideline for just under $60. So, folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. We're still going through Mailbag Monday here in the second week of July as we get ready for Summer League to get started here momentarily for many of our Zags playing professionally. So next question here comes from MB on Discord, who says, if Mark Few puts you in charge of adding the final 4 non-conference games to the schedule, as well as the 2 exhibition games, who would you pick and why? Yeah, Gonzaga's only got 4 games remaining on their schedule. They have, of course, their MTE and the Players Era NIL Festival. We recently learned they'll be playing Alabama and Maryland. We don't know who that third game will be, but likely a high-quality opponent for the Zags. We also already know, of course, Baylor and Creighton and Oklahoma and UCLA and Kentucky and Arizona State. It's already a really well-filled out schedule. And I think the majority of the games that will be added to Gonzaga's schedule will be of the bye game variety. The Zags want to add some of those games in order to have some home games in the non-conference slate, some games where they can maybe test some new things out, whether it's new lineups, whether it's getting some of the younger guys some playing time. And of course, you have the 2 exhibition games, which reminder exhibition games can be secret scrimmages. They can be games against non-D1 opponents. They can be just regular exhibition games that are televised like they had last year with the USC exhibition, charity exhibition games, kind of a variety of different ways to handle it. So here's who I picked. I picked 2 exhibition games. One would be against Willamette. You can insert any D3 team here. I picked Willamette because Cedric Howard recently played at Willamette and because I think it's a cool kind of connection there. Somebody who rose the ranks like he did playing at a D3 school. It's also located in Salem, so it makes sense geographically. And it's just a good chance to get the young guys some playing time. Let's see what Parker Jefferson and Davis Fogel can do. Let's see what, even some of the walk-ons like Alonzo Metz joining the team or Joaquin Reyes Moore. Let's see what they can do. Get Mario St. Superi plenty of playing time in this one, kind of get those guys going and see what they got. And the other exhibition game, I picked Arkansas. It'd just be so fun to get Gonzaga's guards. They need to get some camaraderie. They need to get kind of gelling together. And against an Arkansas team that has 2 of the best guards in the 2025 freshman class on that team, in Malik Thomas and Darius Acuff. John Calipari and Mark Few are friends, and they schedule each other a lot. So I think this is a reasonable thing to project that could happen. And I think would be a good test for Gonzaga early in the season in a game that does not count in the standings. And then my 4 games, for the record, I'm feeling fairly confident all 4 of the games that will be added will be of the bye game variety, but I threw Washington on here because if it was up to me, they'd play Washington. And I also know that Gonzaga, I wouldn't be in charge of making this decision. Danny Sprinkle and Washington canceled the game last year. They likely are the reason this game is not happening again this year. It's supposed to be in Spokane. I would schedule Washington in Spokane. Desmond Claude, Wesley Yates are both players connected to Gonzaga in some way, very talented, both at USC last year. They got an incoming freshman from Germany, Hans Steinbeck, who looked very good in the FIBA U19 tournament recently. This is a good team. This is a good team that's going to be much more competitive in the Big Ten this year than they were last year, and I think this rivalry needs to come back, and I'd love to see them on the schedule. The other 3 are all bye games, and I just picked teams that I would like to see personally. Cal Poly, as a team that was they play a fun brand of basketball under their new coach last year. They still weren't very good in the Big West, but they took Stanford. I think they beat Stanford. They took some other good teams to the brink last year. They play really fast. They score a ton of points. I think it would just be a fun basketball game. And a lot of times these games are not super fun. So I think this is a way to make that more fun. I picked Sacramento State because Mike Bibby's coaching the team. Shaq threw some money on them. They have some talented players on the roster. I don't think that they're going to put it together in a way that makes them hyper competitive right away, but I'm kind of curious about this program. I'm curious about what Coach Bibby can do. So let's throw them on the schedule, see what we got. And then I picked Idaho because there's got to be a regional one. I doubt it'll ever be Eastern Washington as long as Dan Munson is there. So let's make it be Idaho, or, you could replace them with Idaho State or Montana State, somebody like that. But I picked Idaho because I think that's the more fun regional matchup for Gonzaga to play on a semi-regular basis in the non-conference. Next question here comes from Christian via Gmail. Christian says, what can the Zags in the Summer League do to help improve their situations? Box scores can be deceptive in that there are many intangibles that are critical for role players to showcase in Summer League. What are the best and likely scenarios for our Zags Summer Leaguers? Yeah, you got to prove that you can fill the role the team wants from you. And the teams are going to be pretty honest with you. Like, some of these players are literally just here because they need bodies to fill out rosters. And that's no disrespect, but like the likelihood of Jeremy Jones making the Memphis Grizzlies roster is extremely slim. Even the likelihood of Ben Gregg for Boston or Nolan Hickman for Dallas or Caleb Battle for Phoenix, pretty slim. Maybe slightly higher for those guys because of their age relative to Jones's, but still pretty unlikely. But they are some of these guys, it's kind of being communicated like, just do you. Dallas wants to see Nolan Hickman hit open threes. That's what he's good at. Dallas wants to see Ryan Nembhard, who's on a two-way contract. They want to see him facilitate the offense, navigate out of the pick and roll, make good passes. That's what he's good at. Boston wants to see Ben Gregg diving on the floor for loose balls, competing hard defensively, hitting open threes, and spacing the floor as a big man. But then you have somebody like Caleb Battle, where Caleb Battle's strengths are more like isolation scoring and taking guys off the dribble and, drawing contact, getting to the free throw line, and being a player who's kind of a ball-dominant, score-first player. He can do that. And in Summer League, those players tend to put up big numbers, same within the G League. And while I think there's a possibility that Caleb Battle goes out and scores 12, 15, 18 points per game, I don't really think that's what Phoenix wants to see him do. Phoenix is probably looking at him of like, could he be like a 3-and-D guard off the bench? And for Battle, that means you got to prove you can knock down those open shots, those threes. If he's out there doing isolation stuff, but Phoenix is like, we have Bradley Beal, we have Jalen Green, like we don't have opportunity for you to be that player, that may not help him. So you got to fill the role that the team needs from you. Drew Timme has proven capable of doing that, and he's back in Summer League this year. And maybe Brooklyn will say, hey, we want to see you do more of this. We really want to see that three-point shot. We want to see if you can be an offensive hub that, handles the ball at the top of the key. So I think like whatever role they're being asked to fill by the team that they're playing for, I think is what you have to be able to do. Prove that you're capable of filling whatever that role is, and that you can work hard and that you can work together as a team. You don't have a bad attitude, all that stuff, which is kind of obvious, but still very important when you're competing to try to make a roster. So I think a lot of these guys just got to play their game, play the style that they play. But certainly it does it's impacted heavily by what the team is communicating. Hey, this is who we think you are. This is the role we think you can fill on our NBA roster. Prove to us in Summer League that you can do that. Final question of the second segment here. It's another one from Jeff. Jeff says, I've heard rumors that the Mountain West is looking at going after Santa Clara, San Francisco, and St. Mary's, which looks like it'll be a pretty decent basketball conference with New Mexico, Nevada, and Grand Canyon. If Santa Clara and San Francisco were to move to the Mountain West, what would or should St. Mary's do? Take the sure thing and move to the Mountain West with the others, or hang on and hope they get an invite from the Pac-12? And if all three of those teams leave the WCC, what does the conference do? Perhaps combine with the Big West. Okay, a couple of things. I would be pretty surprised if Santa Clara and San Francisco jumped ship before St. Mary's made a decision. So I don't think the likely chance for St. Mary's to be in a predicament where they have to choose between going to the Mountain West with the other Bay Area WCC schools or going to the Pac-12 or hoping the Pac-12 invites them versus staying in a conference that now has no competition with them. I just don't see that as a likely scenario. I think St. Mary's is kind of the linchpin here. I don't think the Mountain West wants Santa Clara and San Francisco without St. Mary's. And I don't think those two would jump ship without St. Mary's also leaving. So I just don't find that to be a particularly likely situation. But let's say it happens. If St. Mary's staying puts them in a position where they're staying in a WCC that barely has enough teams to survive as a conference, that is already now going to have the other schools getting extra jittery because those two teams are gone and there's very little competition at the top of the league, St. Mary's is gone. They would be very, very not smart to stay and hope the Pac-12 invites them if they're getting an opportunity from the Mountain West. Now, if the Pac-12 is presumably going to offer them more and potentially significantly more to come to the conference in the Mountain West, maybe they'd be willing to risk it, but I don't think so. Because I don't think that the share that the Pac-12 would be giving St. Mary's is going to be all that much than what the Mountain West would give them anyway. So if they're faced with wait for potentially a little bit more money from a better basketball conference in the Pac-12 or go for the Mountain West, they're leaving. They're going to the Mountain West. But I just don't find this overall situation really all that likely. Were it to happen, I don't think the WCC would just merge with the Big West. I think they would try to poach from them. They would have to be able to prove that they could pay more money and that their media deal would pay more money to schools like Cal Baptist or Utah Valley in order to convince them to leave the Big West to come to the WCC. I think they would be able to do that. Maybe they go grab somebody like Denver. Maybe they go grab somebody even like a UT Arlington or somebody like that to just kind of cobble something together in order to survive. But I don't think they're merging, even if the worst case scenario happens and they lose those top three teams. Folks, which historical Gonzaga teams would be the most fun to play on the new upcoming NCAA basketball video game? We're going to talk about that and which NBA team Zag fans should be rooting for. All that and more coming up here in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, closing out the show with 3 more mailbag questions to get to. This one comes from the Heartland Zag on Discord, who says, with the confirmation of the NCAA basketball game coming back, which historical Zag team would you play with first, excluding the 2 national championship runner-ups? So if we're not doing the 2016-17 team or the 2020-21 team, personally, the question's directed at me specifically. I'm going to play with the 2012-2013 team. That was my senior year. That was the year that I was on the Kennel Club board, leading the cheers down in the first row of the student section. That was the year that the Zags were ranked number 1 in the country for the first time. That was the year the Zags earned their first ever number 1 overall seed. That was the year Kelly Olynyk was an All-American, came out of absolutely nowhere, having redshirted the previous season. Kevin Pangos' sophomore year, Gary Bell's sophomore year, Elias Harris's senior year, Mike Hart's senior year, the year that he started, the kind of ascension of Mike Hart from a walk-on who was on campus as a regular student before joining the team. And then now he's the starter for the number 1 team in the country, one of the coolest stories in Gonzaga basketball history. This team also had Shemek Karnowski, Sam Dower off the bench, Guy Landry-Eddy, just an incredibly fun, exciting Gonzaga basketball team that I loved watching, that I loved rooting for, that I would love to play with on a video game. Other teams that come up for me, the 1920 team, which we never got to see in the NCAA tournament because of COVID. That team was so fun with Ryan Woolridge and Admon Gilder. They had Joel Iyayi. They had Corey Kispert. Philip Petrusev had a big year that year. That team was fun. And then, of course, you can't ignore 05-06 because Adam Morrison would be a cheat code on this game. And yes, I know previous iterations of this video game have had that team on them. So it's like maybe you'd want to pick teams that have not had the opportunity to be on the game before. But anytime you get a chance to just bomb every shot possible with Adam Morrison, score 40 a night, I think you got to take it. And that would be a lot of fun with that team. Next up from Christian via Gmail, Christian says, who will be our de facto NBA team as Gonzaga fans next year? I fear the Wizards might be the current answer, and they're not hot enough to be a dumpster fire. But with Kispert and Olynyk on the squad, that seems to be the answer. Yeah, for now, Corey Kispert and Kelly Olynyk are on that team. I don't know if Washington's going to look to try to flip Olynyk this offseason. I think more than likely they may look to flip him at the trade deadline if he's playing well, if he's mentoring Alex Sarr well, and they think maybe they can kind of move him and get Sarr some more playing time in the second half of the year if he's playing well enough to get them some draft capital or some young talent or whatever. I think that Kelly Olynyk's not long for the Washington Wizards. Corey Kispert maybe not even as long as Kelly Olynyk. Corey Kispert might be traded in the next week or two. Like, he's been on the trade block. Washington's made it clear they're looking to trade him. I know my Portland Trailblazers are a team that's been connected to him. There are a few others as well. Milwaukee's been connected to him. I think Corey Kispert may not be on the Wizards when the season starts, in which case, if he gets traded to a team that does not have a Zag on it, every Zag in the NBA none of them will be teammates. And in that case, you can kind of pick and choose. Maybe you go with Indiana because I think Andrew Nembhard's going to have the best season of his career because Tyrese Halliburton is out for the season with that devastating ACL injury. Maybe you go with Dallas if you think Ryan Nembhard's going to make the roster. Maybe Nolan Hickman even sneaks onto the roster a little bit, and then you end up having two guys there. Maybe you want to go with Orlando. Paolo Banchero kind of considered Gonzaga, right? He's from Seattle. Maybe that counts along with Jalen Suggs. Maybe you love the Lakers for some reason, and you want to go with them because Rui's on the roster, even though they also signed Augustus Marcelonis, which is a big bummer for Gonzaga fans if you want to root for them. But there's plenty of options. That's what's fun. Like almost half the teams in the NBA have a Gonzaga player on the roster. And again, if Kispert does get traded, then there's no team that has an inherent advantage in terms of being the Gonzaga team. So you can kind of just pick and choose whomever you want. And again, I think there's some other guys that could be on the move. Brandon Clark could be on the move from Memphis. I keep an eye on Zach Collins potentially being on the move in Chicago. Like there's some guys that may not be long for their teams and potentially could team up with other Zags, which might make this choice a little bit easier for fans looking for an NBA team this year. Final question of the show comes from Jeff via Gmail. Jeff says, it looks like 13 of Gonzaga's 16 sponsored teams will have a home in the Pac-12. What do you think will happen with the other three teams, women's rowing, men's rowing, and men's soccer, who do not have a Pac-12 conference to play in? Yeah, as we've been kind of waiting for the rest of the conference to get filled out, we've been paying attention to which teams and which programs are going to be sponsored. The Pac-12 did release a statement indicating which of their programs are or which sports are going to be sponsored by the conference. Baseball was kind of the big hinge of like, they needed another school that played baseball in order to meet the minimum requirement. They have found that in Texas State. For the record, I believe that the Pac-12 baseball will add affiliate teams. They could be teams like St. Mary's. It could be teams like Portland out of the WCC, who's a pretty competitive baseball team, or even like a Seattle U or somebody like that. Teams that are, or maybe they'll try to poach somebody from the Big West, like an Irvine or a Long Beach or somebody like that, who's got some baseball success, baseball history and under their belt. But ultimately, baseball is going to exist in the new Pac-12. So Gonzaga doesn't have to worry about that. As Jeff said, the two rowing programs and the men's soccer team are teams that are not going to be sponsored by the Pac-12. They do not have the option to play in the Pac-12. My assumption is that they will stay in the WCC, to the point where I believe that Gonzaga, when leaving the WCC, probably had some conversations, whether it's a full-on like contractual agreement or at least a handshake agreement of like, hey, whatever of our sports don't end up making it over to the Pac-12, we want to keep them here. And they probably had a good idea what those sports would be. They knew rowing was going to be one of those sports. They probably had a thought that men's soccer would be one of those sports, knowing that it was not sponsored by many of the teams, many of the programs. Of course, every program has football. And from a Title IX perspective, a lot of programs that have football don't have men's soccer. So this is not that surprising. I'd be very surprised if those sports went anywhere other than the WCC. I think they probably already have an agreement to stay in the WCC. I think that the men's soccer program has planned all along to stay in the WCC and has never really wavered from that. Sure, the Mountain West is a decent soccer conference, and it could work for the men's program, but I think that they're locked into the WCC, and I don't even know if we'll really get a public announcement about that. I just think they're going to stay in that conference and continue to be affiliated with them in those sports because they're not sponsored by the Pac-12. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for me today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We got more fun stuff coming your way this week. We'll continue to keep you up to date on recruiting, as Gonzaga has been heavily active in the 2026 and 2027 recruiting classes. We're going to talk about the new look Pac-12 some more, St. Mary's potential addition. We'll get more into detail on that. We'll, of course, talk about Summer League as that's getting started here and getting underway. We'll talk about what that means for guys like Ryan Nembhard and Ben Gregg and Drew Timme and others. If you haven't seen Anton Watson get signed, we'll keep an up to date on that as well. That and plenty more coming your way this week, so keep an eye out. Thanks again for listening, folks. Thanks again for subscribing on YouTube. If you have not done so yet, go hit that little bell button on YouTube. You'll get notified every time there is a new show. All right, folks, have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.